soulmates. You got to check that out. And intuitive since childhood, Sue draws upon dreams, ancient numerology, powerful intuition, and conversations with spirits to help her clients fulfill their soul's mission and use their pain as inspiration for a meaningful life. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, CNN, Real Simple, Yoga Journal, National Health magazines. Sue has trained more than 500 intuitive coaches around the world, and she's been a guest on more than 200 radio and TV shows. Let's give a very warm welcome to Sue Frederick.
I love Toby. Kisses to you, Toby. But we are all here on purpose. As you've been hearing all day, all of us speakers have come to these same conclusions on our own journeys of pain and awakening and discovery, same as each of you. Every time you hit a heartbreak, every time you lose someone you love, every time you lose a job that you think is going to provide for you for the rest of your life, it is your soul's great moment of awakening. And those of you who chose Divine Mother Grief as your teacher to wake you up, to break your heart wide open with grief, you are highly evolved souls who chose this agreement with your departed to help you wake up and remember who you are here and get your great work done. The greatest heartbreak is the greatest gift. And when we're here, we don't want to hear that. And we don't believe it, and we're angry. And I will share my own story so that you don't think I'm just making all this up. Each one of us have had our own journeys. So probably my biggest wake-up moment was July of 1980. My husband was dying from cancer. I was 29 years old and fiercely determined to save his life. I was an outward bound mountaineering instructor and had spent my 20s believing we overcome challenges. That's what mountaineers believe. I see a mountain, I conquer it. However, I had grown up with a lot of intuition and spirituality and dreams that came true down to the last detail. But in my 20s, I was determined to get my feet on the ground, be realistic and practical, and make a living and inspire others. So I was charging up the Rocky Mountains with a backpack, teaching people to overcome their fears and doubts. And then my mountaineering husband, my beautiful, strong, beloved, sweet mountaineering husband, was diagnosed with colon cancer and given 2 weeks to live. So we said, well, we'll overcome this, right? As you say, because you can't face it any other way. So we visited every alternative healer, every conventional healer. Paul spent a year, actually no, he was diagnosed on a July 13th. He made it easy for me to have 1 day a year to grieve him. He was diagnosed on a July 13th, and he crossed over a year later on July 13th. So every July 13th for me is a very sacred day. It's my honoring of my awakening. However, the lesson he taught me, I could not be more grateful for the way he broke my heart wide open. He got me from the minute he saw me. We fell in love under a street light after a day of climbing. I was walking home from climbing with a friend. He was coming home from biking. He was standing under a street light. Our mutual friend introduced us, and I was looking up at him into the light. And I knew in my soul that this was a man who was going to rock my world. But of course, my logic mind said, that means you'll get married and have babies and have the white picket fence, because that's what our left brain tries to do to interpret everything so sweetly. Instead, it meant that he had the greatest soul lesson for me of my lifetime. Because I was so stubborn, so determined, so fierce, and truly needed a big awakening. So, and that's one thing, no matter how strong we are, sometimes that can hurt us. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Sometimes the stronger we are, the more we need to have our hearts broken wide open. So he and I fell in love, madly in love, great love story. We were married very quickly after we fell in love. And then he started having these weird stomach problems. Long story short, on July 2013, a year after diagnosis, and that whole year of diagnosis was an amazing journey. We went to see, of course, he had surgery and chemo and all of these things. However, the doctors gave up on him truly early. I mean, this was the 70s. So at one point they just said, he's got 2 weeks, go home. And we visited every alternative healer, including a profound Native American healer named Chief Foolscrow. He's departed now, but he was a very famous Sioux healer. So we went and visited him, and Chief Foolscrow took me for a walk after he did this amazing ceremony with Paul, and Paul was feeling great. He took me for a walk and he said, "You know that Paul chose you to go through this with him, and that he decided long ago this was how he was going to exit." And I said, "No." And then I lost my voice. I swear, no kidding, I needed to lose my voice. I couldn't speak. So I went back to Paul, and Paul said, "I've been healed." Because Paul could not ever say, "I'm going to die." He was a young man in his early 30s. He was going to go out, with courage and dignity, and not saying, "I give up," even though he knew his soul, it was his time. That was his way. And I was his cheerleader. So we drove home from the visiting Chief Foolscrow, me unable to speak, me knowing now for sure that Paul is exiting, and unable to say a word, divine order in action. And we get home, and Paul starts waking up in the middle of the night singing Lakota songs. Now, I had studied Native American history in college because I went to University of Missouri, and there was a very famous teacher there who wrote Black Elk Speaks. So I had studied a lot of the Lakota, and I was fascinated because I believed I'd had a past lifetime as a Lakota Sioux. So when Paul would start waking up, I could recognize some of these words. And he would sing them, and I'd say, "Paul, what is